All right. How's it going, Coach?
Doing well, Coach. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. I've got Coach Jake Nannen here. He's a high school girls basketball coach from Elkhorn South High School in Nebraska. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about his 5-out driving space offense. So, Coach, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks again, Coach. Hopefully your March Madness bracket is looking good. I've got a few upsets brewing, so hoping we can win our tournament challenges.
Yeah, mine has been busted for the last few hours. So
yeah, I did pick McNeese State, so small victories.
That one was I picked up. I had them here, but up here I didn't take them. So
yeah, but no, as Coach says, my name is Jake Nannen, and tonight I'll be presenting on the 5-out driving space offense. Just wrapped up our second year at Elkhorn South High School in Omaha, and there's a lot of things that we do offensively that really allow us to be successful on that end. So before we dive in, wanted to make sure to give credit where credit is due. Obviously, as basketball coaches, we know that we're always adapting, stealing, and tweaking ideas from others. So about 2 years ago, I joined Mark Cassio at Courtside Consulting, and he helped us a lot with how to play conceptually within a modern spacing template and really begin to stack actions with conceptual triggers. And he's now slid over with Tyler Costin at Savvy Coaching, and I am a member in that group. So if you do see any of the Savvy logos as the slides go, I'm not an originator of the driving space offense or Savvy, but I do want to make sure I'm giving credit where credit is due. So, Coach, I do have some full YouTube videos of our driving space offense. Not going to take the time to share that now, but I'd be more than willing to share any of these slides with other coaches later after we wrap up the presentation. And that'll kind of give you a way to get a taste of what we do offensively. So with our 5-out driving space, we do consider ourselves conceptual. And how we would define a conceptual offense is a series of concepts blended together to form free-flowing movement. And one thing we really like about this offensive style is that all of our create actions and concepts are sequenced together. And we're always forcing the defense to guard two things in a row. And one thing we really enjoy is the ability to give our players A, B, and even sometimes C options with and without the ball. And I think that's best defined as giving our players freedom within structure and the ability to showcase their skill set that they've worked hard to refine over the years. So we always like to think about guided decisions as opposed to those predetermined decisions and patterns that you might see in traditional offense. We're also working in a world of abstract ideas as opposed to those scripted absolutes. And we'll talk about our principles of play that really help us flow. And when we're dealing in a world of these abstract ideas, there's a lot of questions that we answer with, that could happen. So those are some reasons that we believe in conceptual offense and how we would define it. Now, Coach, I know we'll talk about some numbers later, but these are just some of the offensive numbers we've put together from our first 2 years running this 5-out driving space. And we think it does a good job of proving why we like to run it as we continue getting to where we want to be. So with some of these offensive numbers, we do want to continue improving all of these across the board. And although it might not seem like these are jumping off the page, specifically with our points per game, in the previous seasons, before we installed this and before our staff got there, our program was averaging about 42 points per game in the previous 3 seasons. And since we've installed this offense and arrived at our school, we're averaging about 54. So more than a 10-point increase in points per game. And a lot of it has to do with the way that we play. And Coach, we can, of course, dive into those specific numbers later.
Cool.
So why conceptual offense? Not going to take the time to go through all of these right now, but we already mentioned the positives of allowing freedom within structure for players with those A, B, and sometimes C options. And one thing we really like is the ability to adjust or eliminate some of our actions year to year. If we don't like our bounce out trigger that gets us into an inside flare, we can tweak that to a ball screen. If we don't like our fan return trigger, which we'll talk about later, we can tweak that to Princeton point. And it really allows us to play within a modern system while still keeping our structure and spacing flow. And doing so allows our players to play fast, decisive, and free. So with conceptual offense, you're able to blend different create actions into seamless flow. And we choose to blend our row series, which is our fastball, our primary create action, as well as some Princeton action within our flow. And like we mentioned, we can tweak, eliminate, and add as we go within our spacing template of drive and space. So no chance we'll be able to talk about all of these different concepts tonight, but one thing we really think is important as we're installing our drive and space is that sticky language that we can use throughout our program that really allows some of our concepts to stick in our players' minds better. And that's something we took from Savvy that we really enjoy, just quick, sticky language that allows us to teach some concepts that we have in a creative way that the players can remember. And lastly, before we dive in here, we do talk a lot about triggers. Now, in the modern game, we would define an offensive trigger as a connector between different offensive actions. And one thing that's really important with your conceptual offense is making sure all of the players on the court have that shared cognition of what these triggers are and what new offensive action we're flowing into. And we try to give them as many different cues for these triggers as possible, whether it's being vocal and visual, whether it's a certain offensive movement or pass, or even a shape change when we go from our 5-out shape to a 4-out 1-in shape. All of these are different ways that our players can recognize, okay, we are now into a different offensive action, hopefully seamlessly, that allows us to keep attacking the defense in different ways. So a lot of times, coach, and you might agree with this, I feel like as basketball coaches, sometimes we let running offense interfere with scoring. Whether it's a cool new set that we have, maybe it's a continuity that we're working through multiple times to get a great shot. And our goal is to score. And I'm not saying that sarcastically. We want to create and or keep an advantage to end every possession with a highly valued shot every single time. And those principles of play allow us to do so. So, like I said, we probably overcomplicate offense as coaches. If we're playing within a base offensive structure with our 5-out spacing, 4-out space, 3-out 2-in, whatever you choose, once we arrive spaced and organized, all we need is a quick, effective create action that allows us to create an advantage. And then we're using different concepts and dominoes to keep that advantage until we end the possession with a highly valued shot. Sticky language for our kids, spacing before advantage, advantage before shot. So, coach, not going to take too much time to talk about these 0.5 hoops. Like I said, I'm more than willing to share this Google slide with anyone, answer any questions at the end, but there's just some really good sticky language on here that we use, and none of our offensive flow can be successful if we're not playing 0.5 hoops and if we're not staying the actors over the defense reacting. And playing off the catch goes into those 0.5 hoops as well. We strive for all players to read the closeout before they catch the ball. And that would allow us to stampede our catch and attack like a sprinter. It would allow us to shoot those stationary catch and shoot threes that we generate often within our offense. And most importantly, we don't limit reads for our players. Players have the liberty to shoot it, drive it, or move it within our offensive flow. But of course, we encourage players to play to their strengths. And typically, they can figure that out on their own. So, Coach, I feel like I'm going 100 miles per hour. Any questions so far on all things drive and space?
No, I'm following right along here, Coach. Doing a great job here.
All righty.
Keep this train rolling.
Yeah, feel free to interrupt me as time goes if you need anything. I do have
Sounds
a tendency to talk a lot. And as a 4th grade teacher, I got to get it all in before someone interrupts me. So, but hey, within our 5-out drive and space, we do use a modern 5-out spacing template, and we do run the 2-sided break. So it allows us to flow into the half court spaced and organized. And when we can arrive spaced and organized, we stay spaced and organized. So in transition, we're always filling our corners first. We do like to think about rim depth. Now, we've toyed with the idea of calling these corners the money spots because we do generate a lot of catch and shoot corner threes. Haven't gotten there yet. Then the most unique position within our spacing template is our stretch. Our stretch is stacked just above the free throw line extended on top of the corner with their heels against the sideline. In transition, we can fill the stretch on either side. It really just depends on which side of the floor they tag and hug in our 2-sided break. And it's important to know as a teaching point that the stretch is not the wing. Young players especially have the tendency to want to crowd the 3-point line and fill the wing spot. and that is not the stretch. We want to make sure the stretch is stretching the defense east to west, sideline to sideline. And that allows us to naturally flow into our action spots, AKA the slots. Now, we call them the action spots because that's where our best action happens. That's where we get into our rows series, which is our main create action, which is essentially a series of gap creating cuts. And we do like to give our players XY landmarks on the floor. So our action spots are about one big step off the lane line and at least two big steps behind the three-point line. And if you have volleyball lines on your court as a high school coach, we usually like to start our action spots there, or else kids will start to creep up towards the three-point line during games. As we know, that always shrinks as games go on. So with this spacing template, we're really able to stretch the defense east to west, as well as north to south with our action spots and corners. So spacing is always a work in progress, and my goodness, it is imperative to offensive success within this offensive flow.
One question there, Coach.
Yeah, man.
In your spacing, do you run do you teach the traditional, okay, you're a 5, you're getting to the 5 spot, or when you're breaking, down the court and get into your offense, do you want them, as long as these 5 spots are filled, we're good to go?
Good question. So typically on a made break, we'll have an assigned pusher, R1, and an assigned trailer, which would be R5 in this case. But then in this case, players 2, 3, and 4, there are sprinters and they're positionless. So I wouldn't say we're 100% positionless. On misses, we are, because we're be your own outlet on the break. But on makes, we do have an assigned pusher at the 1 and trailer at the 5.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. And then once we introduce our general spacing template, now we're starting to think about our gap principles. And offensively, one of our principles of play is to attack double and triple gaps. And the great thing about our 5-out spacing template is there's always a single gap on one side of the player with the ball and a double or triple gap on the other side due to our gap creating cuts. So we define our spacing through gaps. And in diagram 1 here on the bottom left, you can see that player 1 has a single gap to their left. We do not want to drive that because the next defender is 1 pass away or 1 spot away. We like to call that breaking tackles. And that's something that young players do a lot of the time is they try to drive through these single gaps, and either we turn the ball over, we take pointless dribbles, or we get really stagnant and ruin our flow. So bad things happen when we drive those single gaps, and good things happen when we drive double gaps, where the next defender is 2 passes away or 2 spots away, and even better, triple gaps. And triple gaps, obviously, are when the next defender is 3 spots away. And that's about as much space you're going to get on the court when you're a 5-out spacing template team. So this is very important as a principle of play, is we never drive single gaps. We always pass through them and execute a gap creating cut to open up a double or triple gap. You might hear me talk about getting off the rails a little bit tonight. That's just our sticky language for middle drives. We like to tell players to get off the rails and drive middle because that's typically where the most space is. And then once we talk about those gap principles of attacking double and triple gaps, we start to think about our ball movement. And we have a few pieces of sticky language that we use to move the rock. And that would be pass to the first open player. Nobody stops the ball from moving. We'll talk about our drive pass option, DPO, and then some fairly common passing sequences that allow us to generate really good ball speed and expand our advantage. And that would be a 2-out, which would be 2 passes out of the paint, or commonly referred to as drive, kick, swing. And down, up, over is anytime the ball hits the corner and we can't shoot it or drive it, we're passing up and over to get us into our rows series, which is our fastball that we'll talk about later. So with this type of offense, it's very important that you emphasize that ball movement and ball speed because we do drive, hopefully, half the time into big space. So one concept that we use to promote ball movement is that drive pass option, or what we would call DPO 50-50. This would be similar to a quarterback and RPO in football, where the quarterback has the ability to hand off to the running back or drop back and pass, due to, I'm not a big football guy. What is that? Reading the D end or reading the linebacker? Something like that.
Yeah.
So we like to reference that as, hey, it can't always be my turn to drive through a double or triple gap. Sometimes I need to pass through a single and cut for my teammate. So we really like to have 50-50 balance on that. And one piece of sticky language we use is it can't always be my turn to drive. This allows us to not be a pass and cut team or turn into the dreaded dribble weave team. Not going to spend too much time on 2 passes out of the paint. Again, that's just commonly referred to as drive, kick, swing. And that allows us to generate really good ball speed, promote the one more pass, turning a good shot to a great shot, as well as reopening the paint. Some teams make 2 out and automatic. We don't, because we do sometimes get good action driving the drive, especially from the corner. And then down up over is something we could talk about later. This is a very important passing sequence for us when the ball gets down into the paint or pass to the corner. We always want to think about going up and over because we can put the defense in the blender, expand our advantage, and most importantly, get us back into Rose series if we don't have a shot. And then once we have a chance to talk about ways that we can move the ball, we get into our player movement. And we simply define our player movement as our cutting rules, as well as our dribble penetration reaction rules. So this is all about how we create and maintain space. Remember, we don't basket cut unless we have an advantage. All of our perimeter cuts are designed to create space, AKA double and triple gaps. And that's sometimes hard for our younger players to understand. And we really like to use the sticky language, cutting versus clogging. They've been taught to always be moving, right? Like a chicken with their head cut off, because that's good basketball. Keeps the defense guessing and keeps them moving. But some appropriate times that we would want to cut to the basket would be when we're in transition and we're able to sneak behind the defense for a layup. We talk about burn cuts, which is when our defender loses sight of us and we can back cut to the basket. You turn, I burn. Sticky language. And second cuts for us are also great ways to put pressure on the rim with a basket cut. And that would be triggered by when an offensive player comes to a 2-foot stop and makes eye contact with you. We can look to second cut. So we do cut to the basket, but only with advantage. That helps us from clogging the paint, which is a forbidden sin for us. So Coach, before I dive into these pass and cut rules, anything you need me to speed up on, slow down on?
No, we're doing great. I'm loving it. I'm loving it, Coach.
Thanks, man. Like I said, I feel like I'm talking 100 miles per hour, so cut me off if needed.
Yeah, I'm with you. And if I have any questions, I will definitely stop you and ask.
Sounds good. So within our offensive flow with our cutting rules, we think about the direction of the pass for clear and concise directions. So anytime that we pass down the floor, we always cut away. Now, there are some instances where as a B option, we could allow a player to drift to the next offensive spot. And that could happen in a situation that we see in frame 2, because sometimes if we always cut away, the defender's able to kind of clog the paint and form a little bit of a traffic jam. So player 5 could pass down and drift to the next offensive spot. That would allow player 4 to pound and pitch it right back to them for a shot or advantage catch that they could stampede downhill. But for clear and concise sake, for simplicity, we just pass down and cut away. And that's done us well. So when we pass down, we cut away. When we pass up the floor, we automatically stay. Now, this is where we think about our down, up, over passing sequence. And that is an automatic within our offense. If we pass up the floor, we always want to go over. So why we wouldn't necessarily want to drive, let's say we're talking frame 1 here, and player 2 passes up to player 5. Technically, player 5 could drive right. It's a double gap. But we also know the ball just came from that corner. Now, we also know that player 5 can't drive left because it's a single gap. They'd be breaking tackles, probably turning the ball over or ruining our flow. So in reality, on a pass up the floor, if we can't shoot it, the only option is to go over and execute a Rose series cut. And our last cutting rule is our pass across the floor. This is absolutely imperative to our offensive flow because this triggers our main create action, our fastball, our bread and butter. So we want to pass across the floor, action spot to action spot, early and often. as many times as needed to create an early advantage. A pass across the floor for us triggers our rows series. As mentioned, this is a series of gap-creating cuts that a player can execute after a pass across the floor. The full package after a pass across is to fingers cut, fan cut, or follow with a ball screen. For us, we only fingers cut or fan cut for simplicity's sake. A, B option. Now, the misconception would be that the 5-out drive in space is just the rows series, and that's not the case. We do have a few other series of actions or families of actions that we can flow into conceptually with triggers. So it is important to note that a trigger for row series for us is that pass across the floor, but it's also important to note for players that there is a shape change coming with our fan return and some bounce out triggers. So if we are 5 out with no player cutting to the nail and there's a pass across the floor, we are in row series. Everyone has clear and concise clarity on what create action we're in. And like I said, that row series really is our fastball. It's our primary create action. If we're playing a team that we can pump fastballs by all night with our 2-sided break and our row series, we will. But we know there's going to be some teams that are going to be able to take away our fastball. And that's when we think about our curveball and our slider with some different actions that we talk about. So our row series is our bread and butter. In our first year at Elkhorn South, all we had in was our 2-sided break and our rows series to go along with some of our other concepts we've discussed. And our fingers cut is 100% our bread and butter. Fingers cuts are very similar to brush screens. And we define a fingers cut, it's almost a ball screen disguised as a cut. We're not really trying to hit the defender, wink, wink, because it's just a cut, wink, wink. But if we do hit a primary defender on the ball with our fingers cut, and we do create a little bit of a traffic jam, that's almost an automatic small advantage being created. And almost, I would say 75% of the videos in that YouTube film are fingers cuts. And we really make sure that with our fingers cuts, we've got 10 fingers to the sky. We are sprinting through the elbow all the way to the corner, punting cutting assists for our players to attack triple gap off of our tail. So these are absolutely our bread and butter create action, and it is a cut.
Coach, question there. You said you coach girls, and I coach girls, and I I don't call it a fingers cut. I can't remember how I referred to it because I referred to it a couple of different ways. But how long did it take you to implement that? I've had difficulty teaching the girls, saying, "Hey, as long as you do this legally, it's legal." And brush by that defender. How long did it take you to kind of install that? Because my girls, they just want to kind of avoid brushing into that defender and avoid maybe getting a call there. So how long did it take you to install the fingers cut?
Sure. I would say a couple weeks before they got comfortable. I mean, it is really important to have that sarcastic sense of humor of, hey, girls, this is a create action, right? Like, we are actually trying to hit somebody. We are trying to set a moving screen, but wink, wink, this is just a cut. And I think that's where those landmarks come into play. We are never, and I mean this non-sarcastically now, we are never headhunting. Our landmark really is the elbow. And if there happens to be a defensive player in the way, we get more bang for our buck that way. But it's amazing how easy that fingers cut creates a small advantage. The player guarding player 5 here cannot help but turn their shoulder, open up their body, small advantage created, and we ride the wave from there.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, would highly recommend the fingers cut in any offense. And then kind of our sister B option cut to a fingers cut would be a fan cut. And when we're arriving neutral against set defense, we really like to start possessions with 50-50 balance, just to keep the defense off kilter. So although fingers cuts are certainly our bread and butter, we do like the fan cut. And the fan cut would be defined as a cut away from the pass to that same side stretch. And we call it a fan cut because all players will move in the same direction. And this is a rounded cut along the NBA 3-point line. And we do ask our players to keep their shoulder squared to the ball as they're shuffling down to the stretch, because if we turn and sprint, it's going to be really hard for that player to find a balance step, reopen their bodies to the rim, and then have a catch and shoot. So as we do fan cut and we shuffle, keeping our shoulder squared to the hoop, this does trigger a strong cut from the player below them. And this strong cut is important because what we'll talk about next is our fan return. If player one can't shoot it or rip it baseline, we're going to return it back up the floor, and that's going to trigger a new offensive action with a new shape. So as player one does pass across the floor to player five, they could fingers cut, but they've chosen to fan cut. Player five is going to recognize this, and we automatically pound and pitch, or what we would call a boomerang, right back to player one. And player one should shoot it, rip it, or return it. And like we mentioned, off these fan cuts, these are great connectors to a new offensive action. So if a player cannot keep or create an advantage off that boomerang that we see in frame one, we're thinking 0.5 hoops, right? We shoot it, drive it, or move it. Off a fan cut, that would be shoot it, rip it, or return it. And in frame two, we can see that player one has almost boomeranged the boomerang or returned it back up to player five. And that serves as a trigger for all players on the court. Okay, there was a return pass made off a fan. We are now in a new offensive action. Another thing that allows players to see that we're in a new action is our shape change. We have now gone from a 5-out spacing template to a 4-out 1-in spacing template. This is another cue that players can see, okay, I'm not looking to drive into big space here. There's a player at the nail. We want to think about playing through them. So when we return that pass, we very much consider this fan return as our curveball, right? If you can hit our fastball and take away our fingers cuts and fan cuts out of Rose series, we need to hit you with something else to keep you off balance and add to our arsenal. And the great thing about fan return as a secondary create action, you can combine it with anything that you want out of this 4-out 1-in shape. We've used it for Princeton chin, back screen, flare screen. We've used it for Princeton point, which we call get game, where we feed the nail and then cut it, turn it, or split it. Heck, you could even use this as some type of ball screen trigger. So fan return is kind of the first conceptual trigger that we have to flow into a different offensive action conceptually without a play call. Any questions, Coach, on fan return? It's a little bit unique, but we get decent mileage out of it as a curveball.
Yeah. When you first pulled the slide up and I saw number 2 sitting at the nail, and on the return, my first thought was, well, now we have, if one goes to the corner, we have a great double gap, but 2 sitting there. So that kind of is maybe a little bit of a caveat to the rule, a little bit of an exception, because, there's somebody in front of you. So you answered that question there, but what would you say if a player, didn't quickly recognize that 2 is there and, starts to drive downhill? Does that throw a wrench into the plan, or, is that, hopefully everybody spaces back out, 2 doesn't interfere with 5, and, but the main question being, would a drive out of this return cause any kind of wrenches getting thrown in there?
Possibly. And to answer that question, remember connecting back to that down, up, over concept or passing sequence. Whenever we pass up the floor, we are always looking to go over. So what's actually happened in the past is once we return it up to player 5 and we do go over, player 5 has fingers cut, and we've had player 4 not recognize, oh, snap, we're in a different offensive action here, because they fail to recognize the shape change, right? So what ends up kind of happening is as player 5 fingers cuts to 3's corner, player 4 will attack that, and it kind of turns into a wonky ball screen, which isn't the worst thing in the world. And if that were to happen, player 2 could also just escape opposite the drive and fill that action spot, and we keep the flow. Because we would rather have a player make the wrong decision fast than the right decision slowly, if that makes sense. So that has happened, but it's usually out of that down, up, over sequence.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point there. Make the wrong decision fast. I've said it to our players is, hey, the only bad decision you can make is just standing there. It's being stagnant. Keep the flow. Keep things moving.
100%. And that allows players to play fast, decisive, and free, knowing that, okay, I was open for that catch and shoot 3 there, but I decided to stampede off the catch. That's okay, because we can always remain the actors.
Yep. No, thank you.
We already talked about down, up, over, and I hope now you can maybe see the importance of that passing sequence, because down, up, over, that gets us right back into our rows series, which is our fastball, and that allows us to very quickly get into a fingers cut or a fan cut and possibly fan return. So if you run any type of 2-guard front, I would absolutely recommend that down, up, over sequence. And then, Coach, not going to take too much time to talk about our dribble penetration reads, which we call cracking the shell being the 3-point line. But we do have general progressions of rack it, counter it, kick it, and protect it. And talking about some of the advantage reads that we have, when we should counter a drive, when we should kick it, when we can protect it. We can always go back to that as needed. Timing-wise, Coach, what's left in the presentation, we probably have off-ball movement, bounce outs, and get game. Is there anything that you would want me to focus on here presentation-wise before we move on?
Yeah, let's definitely talk about the off-ball movement.
Okay.
Something that I run into a lot, and I feel like a lot of coaches run into a lot, is the players who are off the ball having a hard time reading it or integrating themselves into what's happening on the floor.
100%. So a lot of basketball teams can arrive spaced and organized, right? But I think good offensive teams are able to stay spaced and organized as the possession progresses. And that's why this off-ball movement is so important. Now, we know that we're thinking about freedom within structure, right? We do want to give players the ability to make plays. With our off-ball movement, we are very particular and emphasize greatly about how we should move when the ball is being driven at us and away from us. So, generally speaking, when we are off the ball and the ball's being driven at me, a good rule of thumb from the player's perspective is to hold my spot, locked and loaded. We are certainly on the extreme end of holding space when the ball's being driven at us. So specifically when we're in the corner, we see that player 2 is attacking double or triple gap off the rails. Number 1 recognizes, okay, the ball is being driven at me. Whose turn is it to score? Our sticky language is your turn versus my turn. Player 1 would tell you, okay, it's player 2's turn to score right now. They're attacking the basket. They need space. It is my job to hold the corner locked and loaded. And we can think of that selfishly too, right? Because I know if my defender helps from the corner, player 2 is going to kick it to me for a stationary catch and shoot 3. So we really like the phrase of your turn versus my turn. Does my teammate need help or space? And a good cue for when player 2 would need help is when they come to a 2-foot stop. If player 2 comes to a 2-foot stop deep in the paint, that's probably a cue for player 1 to unlock from the corner and begin finding an open window. And we don't burn cut a lot, Coach. I've never understood the circle movement of read and react, or, when a drive comes left, I move left. I think it really interferes with driving space, your turn versus my turn. But player 1 would have the liberty to burn cut or back cut if their defender loses sight of them. And our sticky language for that would be you turn, I burn, because that would be a basket cut with advantage. And the rules do pretty much stay the same at the stretch. We're on the extreme end of holding space, and I think that really helps us. But a good cue for player 3 is that they need to hold shot ready, locked, and loaded until player 1 gets below them on the drive. Then that would be an adequate time to lift back for the pitch back, where we can get a pitch back catch and shoot 3 or another off the rail stampede drive into big space. But the cue for that would be the ball gets below me, because one of our golden rules is on any dribble penetration, we always need our 4-out spacing spots filled. That unlocks second cuts. That unlocks 2 outs. That unlocks down, up, overs. So that would be our golden rule that we do strive to get into on ball being driven at me. And I'll say it one more time because I think it's beneficial. We generate a lot of catch and shoot stationary threes, which turns, in a perfect world, good shooters into great shooters into elite shooters, as opposed to shots on the move, coming off pin downs, coming off flares. So we take a lot of pride in holding our spot, giving our teammates space to make plays.
With that said, a lot of stationary threes, everybody wants to score the ball. Everybody wants to shoot the three. So on your team or in your system here, is everybody greenlit to shoot the ball? And how would somebody achieve that if they are not, given the green light to fire away?
Sure. So within our 0.5 hoops, we do not limit reads for players, but we do encourage them to play to their strengths. Some players recognize quicker than others that they are not great shooters, and that limits their attempts. Other players, you need to be a little bit more stern with your encouragements, but we do not tell players to not shoot. We believe in fast, decisive, and free. And yeah, maybe it would take a hit or two on our catch and shoot 3 percentage, but we want confident, excited players on the court. But we certainly encourage players to play to their strengths. So yes, everyone technically has the green light, but that's how I would answer that question.
For sure. I think from my perspective of things is, I want players, even if they practice in our shooting drills and they practice and they don't hit a single three, but they pass up a wide open opportunity in a game, they don't drive it or they don't shoot it. I feel that the defense is making a mental note in their head, like, player A is going to be slow on those decisions. They're going to, be a little bit more reserved. I can help off a little bit more, or we can go and put a little more pressure on players, 3, 4, and 5. So definitely want players to keep shooting, especially wide open, set shots.
Absolutely. And, if you're 2 of 25, maybe we should think about getting off the rails or moving it through a single gap more often. But
and that's our job, to encourage them to, hey, make this decision. Make this decision.
Exactly. But I'll tell you, as a coach, what would really make me lose sleep at night would be playing against an offensive team that has 5 players hunting their shot. Whether it's from inside the paint off the drive, catch and shoot threes. If you have 5 players on the court that are aggressively hunting, you become really hard to guard, regardless of what your individual strengths are.
Definitely. I think we all lose sleep over those teams when they're coming up on our schedule.
Absolutely. And then final piece of off-ball movement for us, when the ball's being driven at me, I'm holding space, locked and loaded, shot ready. When the ball is being driven away from me, I fill behind and square the top. And squaring the top is sticky language for filling the action spots. So in diagram 1 here in the bottom left, we can see that player 3 is getting off the rails and attacking triple gap middle, probably off of a fingers cut from 4. And player 1 and 5, they're holding their spot, shot ready, locked and loaded, because the ball is being driven at them. But player 2 has the ball being driven away from them, so they're going to sprint to fill behind and square the top. The more common situation would be in diagram 2 here, where player 1 has passed across and fingers cut, and player 5's attacking triple gap. I forgot to put player 2 on here, it looks like, but player 2's corner holding their spot, and player 4 and 3 register, okay, ball's being driven away from me, I need to fill behind and square the top. And that allows us to get into our 4-out spacing when the ball gets into the paint. And just some other minor rules that pop up. if there is a player cutting to my corner, I generally speaking bump up a spot, sometimes two. Pretty normal motion rules there. And after a pass to the perimeter, I can escape to any corner or I can punch, which is our sticky language for penetrate, pitch, post. And we like to think about if we're passing on the run, very similar to a quick pitch, we should probably escape because all of our momentum's already going towards the perimeter. But if we pass after a 2-foot stop, which would, for us would be a stride stop, we could think about punching and posting up for the give and go there. And then, coach, we kind of got bounce out, some get game, and that's about it. Would you like us to wrap up presentation, or is there anything else you want to see on here?
Let's talk about the bounce outs and then the get game.
Sure.
And then I had one more piece. Actually, let's touch about this. So we're talking 5-out spacing, and you can explain it in your system. I'm personally a believer that you can maintain 5-out spacing and have a player in the post. Now, we, and like probably a lot of other schools, have a solid post player, 6 foot. Somebody I personally wouldn't want to move away from mid-range.
Sure.
How would that look in the 5-out system we're talking here?
Sure. So we have never ran 4-out just due to, I guess you can call it roster makeup. We just have never had the size to do so. So generally speaking, your pass and cut rules and some of those concepts would stay the exact same, but your off-ball movement's going to be a little bit different. So we would have number 5, our post, starting in the dunker spot. And for me personally, I wouldn't care which side they started on. So same rules would apply, but if player 2 passed across the floor to player 1 and fingers cut here, no harm, no foul. Player 1 would still have the ability to attack double and triple or pass through single and cut away. But let's just say that maybe we move 5 over here to start the possession, just for example's sake. And as player 1 attacks triple gap, we would have player 5 move opposite the drive right, move right, and that would allow player 1 to dump it or kick it. And player 3 would continue filling behind and squaring the top. Player 2 becomes our skip back. And this is where we start to see the difference of 5-out and 4-out is the off-ball movement. And the only other rule, coach, I would say with your post would be if the ball's passed to your side, like let's say 1 passes down to 2 and cuts away. If the ball's passed to your side, post. Or else you're moving opposite of drives looking for those dump offs. So I'm not going to pretend like I'm the master of 4-out drive in space. I've never ran it, but those are some of the differences that I know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't think it's much different, but you definitely would want your post to maintain that spacing. And then I think a lot of success there, or a lot of positive plays would come from your down, out, and up. If I'm using the language right.
100%. So if 1 went down to 2, same cutting rules, right? Pass down, cut away. That bumps everyone up a spot or 2. And if player 5 posts up, we can feed. If player 2 can get off the rails, great. But like you mentioned, if player 2 can't shoot it or drive it, they're moving it back up to 3. When we pass up the floor, we stay. When we pass up, we always go over, and boom, we're right back into rows series. We can fingers cut, we can attack triple, post moves opposite, and player 2 holds because the ball's being driven at them. So a lot of similarities, certainly.
Yeah, for sure. Let's if you want to get into some of the what you called get game.
Sure. So for us, get game really is Princeton point. We call it get game. I don't know why. Sticky language. But get game is whenever we have a player strong cutting or flashing to the nail or ball side elbow. And with our Princeton point, when we feed that player in the elbow or nail, our sticky language is cut it, turn it, split it. Cut it, turn it, split it. And similar to our 0.5 hoops, as player 2 catches at the nail or ball side elbow, frame 1 here, or frame 7 randomly, that would be our traditional point series alignment. And frame 10 would be our jungle formation out of the Princeton point series. So once player 4 feeds player 2, again, we would rather have them make the wrong decision quickly than the correct decision slowly. I don't care if player 4 cuts it, turns it, or splits it. All I want them to do is play fast, decisive, and free, because this is our slider. This is our changeup. This is not our fastball. We don't need to get really, really good at get game. We just need to have it in the arsenal as a secondary attack. And we do use a lot of our Princeton point or get game as calls for neutral starts to start with a different method of attack. But we can also flow into Princeton point with a shape change when that player is coming to nail off a fan return, fan swing. And again, the worst decision is indecision. So these would just be some organic ways to flow into Princeton point, or what we call get game. We already talked about fan return, where player 1, who has just caught a boomerang pass off of a fan cut, has returned it back up to player 5. Boom. The return pass and our shape change triggers a new offensive series. Fan swing, we didn't get a chance to talk about tonight, but it looks like player 1 passed across to player 5 and fan cut, which triggered 2 to strong cut to the elbow. But player 5 was thinking, hey, it can't always be my turn. Sometimes I need to pass down and cut away. And when that happens, as player 2 finishes their strong cut, player 4 should now recognize, okay, I'm not looking to get off the rails and drive into big space here because there's a player flashing to the ball side elbow. I'm not looking to drive. I want to feed to the strong cutter and play through them. And then we talked about punching earlier on a kick out pass after a 2-foot stop. And another way you could flow into your get game or Princeton point is it looks like player 5 kicked it out to 2 and decided to punch. Now, they won't always get the ball back there, so player 5 could chase or space. And it looks like as the passing sequence of down, up, over initiated, 5 decided to follow the ball, and hopefully 3 would recognize as a shape change, oh, snap, there's a player flashing to the nail. I'm not looking to drive this. I need to play through the nail. And those would all be different ways that we could get into get game with a cut it, turn it, and split it. But I would say most of our Princeton comes from calls for neutral starts.
Cool. I think that flowed nicely. As we just talked about the 4 out, 1 in, you have a strong post, a tall post player.
Yes.
Your get game would probably be a primary look for you, given that if you have a tall player. Good.
100%, man. And we didn't get a chance to talk about bounce outs, and that's okay. That's another organic trigger that we can use. But in 4 out, it actually works much better, because let's say that player 1 passes across to player 4 and does decide to fingers cut. And we know that as player 2 bumps up and player 1 finishes their cut, if player 4 decides to attack triple gap, they might not always be able to create an advantage, and their primary defender might show chest. And anytime we read that neutral defender above the elbow, we are bouncing out to the next offensive spot. And by then, player 2 has filled behind and squared the top. And that bounce out could actually trigger your post to flash. And now player 4 could feed. Player 2 might pass out of the bounce out and fingers cut again. And boom, without a play call, your bounce out has triggered your Princeton point formation. Cut it, turn it, split it. So I like a lot about 4 out. I really do. We just don't have the personnel for it.
Yeah. I've had, in my 3 years, I've had two posts over 6 foot tall. And
I feel your pain.
And it's we've we've played a lot of opponents where it's like, all right, I don't know how we're going to defend them because they have a 6'3" post, and we're after my 6-foot post, we're down here, and I guess it's just pressure the heck out of them and make them make wrong decisions.
Oh yeah, yep. We're a full front team as well, so I feel your pain. And then, like we talked about, Coach, bounce outs can be a great conceptual trigger to naturally flow into a different action without a play call. We would classify the bounce outs as our slider, right? So now you've got Rose series, our gap creating cuts, our fastball. If we can pump those by you all night, we will. And now we have talked about our fan return as a curveball, which we pretty much use for Princeton chin. And bounce outs can allow us to get into inside flares. We have our get game. So that, I hope that proves that, although Rose series is a big create action for us, the 5-out drive in space is not the Rose series. You can add different series of actions in, and the beauty of it is it's all conceptual. There's organic triggers that serve as cues for all players to have shared cognition, which I believe makes us hard to guard. There's always action after the action. We're always stacking concepts. But again, let's not forget about the most important part of offense. Base optimal spacing, a simple create action. Keep that advantage until you generate a highly valued shot.
Awesome. I think that that kind of flows into some of the questions I had prepared before this. Love the offense, the presentation. And so let me start with some of the questions.
Sure.
I thought of before we started talking tonight, and as you were talking about the 5-out drive in space. So everybody wants to score, or at least as a coach, I personally hope that everybody wants to score.
Yeah.
I want to see everybody score, and I don't mean, okay, everybody's going to score tonight and we're going to manufacture a basket. I want everybody to, naturally score the basketball. And statistically, there's going to be girls who score, or players who score it more, players who don't score it as much. But two-part question here. Say before you took over at Elkhorn South, how many players were scoring, what were their scoring averages? And then now that you've implemented the 5-out drive in space, what are the scoring averages? In other words, do you have multiple players scoring 10 plus, multiple players, do you have 2 players scoring 15 to 20 a game, and then everybody filling in, or do you have 4 players scoring 10 a game and then everybody filling in with 4, 6, 8, base balance like that?
Sure. I like to think we have pretty good balance. Last year, we had a player average about 15, and then we had 2 other players about 10, and then 7. This year, we had a little bit more balance without kind of that alpha score where we were at, I think, 11, 9, 7, 7, and trickled down from there. So although in an offensive system, our best players are getting the most shots, but I do feel like we're able to get some really good balance, which again is our end goal, right? We want 5 players on the court that are threats to shoot it from the perimeter, drive it off the bounce. And that's what we want to give opposing coaches cold sweats for at night when they're prepping for us.
For sure. I think everybody's dream is to have 3 players who can score 10 points or more, and just beat your opponents with a numbers game.
Absolutely.
How do you get to as a coach, I see 5-out drive in space conceptually. I love it. I think after tonight, I want to run through a brick wall and then start installing it with my team. How do I get to that point? What kind of things do I need to be running at practice? What kind of drills should we be running to optimally get to the 5-out drive in space?
Absolutely. So I would start with the general progressions of what to install in a particular order. And that's kind of the way the presentation was also laid out. So the first thing that I would do with installation is you could go either or. You could start with your transition break, make and miss. How are we going to flow into the half court? Or you could start off with teaching the offensive spots before flowing from transition. And once you had a chance to do either or from there, it's absolutely critical that you are super detailed with where your XY coordinates are on the floor. We need to know where we are arriving spaced and organized at. And then from there, once we have our spots introduced and we know how we're flowing out of transition into our early offense, then we would flow right into our gap principles, making sure that we understand single gaps, double gaps, triple gaps. And as we're introducing that, we're starting to think about some of our conceptual sticky language, getting off the rails into big space, our drive pass option. And once we start thinking about understanding our gap principles and what type of space we should be attacking, what our options are off the catch, that's when we need to start thinking about our player movement and how we're going to create and maintain that space. So once we're able to talk about gap principles, how we want to move the ball, what our cutting rules are, then we're able to flow from there. And we're able to introduce our rows series. We're able to introduce how we can organically flow into fan return. We're always emphasizing 0.5 hoops. We're always emphasizing some of these different playing off the catch. So if I were to go in order, that's exactly how I would do it again. Transition attack, offensive spots, gap principles, how we can move the ball, our player movement, and building from that.
Very cool. What's a Coach Nannen practice look like? You know, is it a 3-hour drag them out? Is it an hour and a half get them in and out? You know, and how long do you spend on drills, small sided games, things like that?
Sure. So typically preseason, we usually max out at 2 hours. Towards the beginning of the year, we're going 2 hours from pretty much end of November through December. And then we kind of decrease as the year progresses. So after winter break, we're probably thinking about hour 30, hour 45. And as the season progresses, we're probably dipping to 1:30, but it's rare we'll go shorter than an hour 15. I think we sprinkle in a few hour practices here and there, but our good rule of thumb is as every month goes by, our practice should be decreasing as we go. We're not super specific with that. And regards to practice structure, we're typically starting off with some type of pre-practice daily vitamins, whether it's finishing at the rim, warming up our shooting, ball handling, you name it. And then we're usually getting into our dynamic warm-up, stretching routine, and then we're off to the races. We're typically starting with some skill development for about 15, 20 minutes. That could be true individual skill development, or that could be team. That would look like a lot of footwork, starts and stops, playing off the catch, one-on-one advantage finishing. And after that, we're probably looking at a lot of some SSGs. We do a lot of 4-on-4. We do a lot of 2-on-2. And we're working our way up into probably, I would say, a good 30 minutes of 5-on-5 time. And I would say we don't really have a specific breakdown time for defense every day. We usually are doing some two-way teaching. So within our small-sided games, we're working on our defense. So a lot of our drills, or I should say games, would be two-way teaching. So generally speaking, off the top of my head, that would be our general structure. And I'd be happy to share any of our favorite SSGs that help us play fast, decisive, and free.
No, definitely. I'd love if you have an email or file with those, please send those my way. I'd love to dive into that. So, Coach, before we started recording here, you've been coaching for 7 years.
Correct.
All right, and all time, what is your all-time favorite drill?
I would say right now, my all-time favorite drill would have to be our 5-on-5 transition buildup. And it's probably one that you've ran. You always start off in a full court setting with a 2-on-1 down. and then you're going 3-on-2 back,
Yep.
4-on-3 back, 5-on-4 back, and then you're working up into your 5-on-5 live. And we really like that because we play a lot of advantage basketball. Probably 90% of our practice is playing with advantage as opposed to creating that advantage, which I think gives us an advantage, as I try not to get tongue-tied there. But that's one that allows us to work on our transition break, being your own outlet, transition spacing, advantage basketball, scrambling defense. I mean, it hits everything. I could probably do an entire practice of 5-on-5 transition buildup and feel okay about it. How about yourself?
I agree. I've taken, I love that. I love the 5-on-5. I've also flipped it. So we start out 5-on-5 and the player who makes the shot goes off. So it'll be 5-on-5 and 5-on-4, then 4-on. It's a little bit longer than 4-on-4, then 4-on-3. A lot of different situations. I'm right now, I think I found myself, I can't remember the exact number, but I think 25% of our overall drills this year, we ran continuous 3-on-2.
Nice.
Pushing the pace, trying to get a lot of shots up. So right now, continuous 3-on-2 has been my go-to, my favorite drill.
Absolutely. And I will say, I'm a sucker for any type of one-on-one advantage finishing drill. I'm always on the lookout for ways to give our driver an early small advantage or even a big advantage and work on those rim decisions, finish fast, strong, rack it, kick it. So, I mean, we have millions of ways to start those one-on-one finishing drills, but in reality, they're all the same. So I'm kind of obsessed with those. We probably do them too much, but I always like finding new creative ways to work on our finishing one-on-one.
For sure. Well, Coach, I don't want to take too much of your time. I got one more question for you. Today was the first official day of the round of 64.
Yeah.
You've got your brackets. You've probably got way too many brackets. If you're like me, you've overthought it. You've lost sleep over it. I don't know why, but who at the end of the day are you pulling for?
I am a big Nebraska Cornhuskers fan.
Of course.
So that was unfortunate. It was only a few months ago when we were a projected 7 seed looking to make some noise. That did not end well. I live in Omaha, so I keep an eye on Creighton. They had a nice win today. I think they can give Auburn a run for their money.
Yep.
But I have no dog in the fight anymore, but I did choose Duke to win it all.
Okay.
I'm a little nervous about the flag injury, but they're good. They're good enough without him, I believe.
Yeah.
But I think he's playing tonight, so we'll see. What about you?
I've watched a lot of college basketball in the last month to really try and make this year my best bracket, but in each one, I've taken Auburn. I don't know why. I've seen them play a few times, and I don't know, I think they're tough. I think it's their year.
And you know what's crazy is we could watch as much basketball as humanly possible. We could think deeply about every single matchup. And in reality, I could probably flip a coin for winners, and that bracket would do better than me deeply considering. It's crazy.
I agree. It's sometimes, you can throw out the Ken Pom and throw out all those stats, throw it out. It's, the teams that win, all they talk about is the coach and the players love the locker room. They love the atmosphere. They have a cohesion that's top notch, and it doesn't matter what the stats are when they reach March, boom, they'll rattle off 2-3 wins and be that Cinderella.
Absolutely. Anything can happen. That's the beauty of it.
It's madness, I tell you.
It is.
But Coach, you got your contact information up there. Can anybody contact you night or day?
Absolutely. Shoot me a call, follow me on Twitter, shoot me a message, email. Happy to continue to grow the game. Like I said, I've learned from a lot of great coaches, specifically Savvy Coaching right now, as well as a lot of other resources. So I appreciate you having me on as well, giving me the opportunity to grow the game. That's what it's really all about. So I'm happy to pay it forward and answer any and all questions coaches might have.
No, I appreciate you coming on, giving us your time tonight, Coach. A lot of valuable information here, and look forward to future conversations with you.
Absolutely, man. Would love to talk hoops anytime. And once again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Coach. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. See you later, Coach.